Hello everybody, you're welcome back again to the Reggae Appreciation Society. By 1977, Dennis Brown was already a superstar in Jamaica and within sight of attaining legendary status. It had been 11 years since he emerged as the boy wonder, appearing on stages with established artists like Byron Lee and the Dragonaires, and 7 years since his debut as a recording artist with his album No Man is an Island. And by the age of 20, the crown prince of reggae music was already a seasoned veteran in the music business. He had worked with dozens of producers like the great Coxsone Dodd and had seen the good, the bad and ugly sides of being an artist. Like many singers in his time, he had hit records and was a big star, but his earnings were very far from his sales figures, as the producers were the ones getting all the cash. Dennis, being the smart youngster that he was, began to nurse the idea of becoming his own executive producer, establishing his own record label and eventually controlling his own destiny. He already had a fan base to sell records, but there was the problem of the rugged mafia-type landscape of the music business to deal with in Jamaica. But after many shows in England and Europe, he realized that there was a strong demand for his music abroad, especially in the UK, and that sparked the idea of establishing his own record label in England. A link-up and collaboration with a friend in England would birth his company D.E.B Music in late 1977 and saw Dennis relocating over there by 1978. In the beginning, that record label was off to a mind-blowing start, with money rolling in directly into his pockets and his music getting more exposure and topping the British charts. Not to mention signing up and releasing the music of the likes of Reggae Isaacs and cementing the popularity of Lovers Rock in England that endures till this day. But in a very short time, that record label had failed and had to be wound up due to the shady practices of his business partner that ended that dream. Let's take a look at the rise and fall of Dennis Brown's D.E.B Music. Now, the tale of Dennis Brown's ill-fated record label began with his then friend and business partner, Castro Brown. Castro was born in Jamaica but moved to England at the age of 10. His involvement with music as a business began at the age of 14 when he began to work as a DJ for Sir Coxsone Sound in 1965, an outfit that was among the first sound systems in Britain. And Castro left Coxsone's outfit at the age of 18 and worked as a freelance promoter and dancehall DJ until 1973, when he opened a reggae nightclub in the Croydon area of London. That was the period that he became acquainted with Dennis, because in those times, Dennis Brown had been traveling a lot to England, playing plenty of shows all over the country, and he had become a star on the strength of his first 3 albums, especially his third one, Super Reggae and Soul, which had been released on the UK-based Trojan Records in 1972. That album fully introduced Dennis Brown to UK audiences, and the then 15-year-old voice had just begun to break into his trademark deep honey-coated baritone. Dennis toured the UK extensively in 1973 and became very friendly with Castro. Castro in 1974 formed his own label, Morpheus Records, with a view to pushing out reggae music from Jamaican-based musicians. But the business got off to a very shaky start. Dennis was a very generous and kind soul, so when Castro would send him telegrams or letters asking for help with money, he never hesitated to help his friend out. Unfortunately, Castro Brown's Morpheus label sadly crumbled in 1976. Around that time, Dennis was sick and tired of working tirelessly and slaving for producers in exchange for no royalties or any meaningful compensation for all his labor. So in 1977, he would go on a massive tour of the UK with Big Youth and came up with the idea of establishing his own imprint in that country, which had a much better structured music industry and also housed his largest fan base outside of Jamaica. And as he began to work on how to get this idea off the ground, the first name that came to his mind was his old pal in England, Castro Brown. But when he mentioned Castro to his friends, they all warned him not to partner with him, as they all felt that he was unreliable and incompetent. But as I said earlier, Dennis was a very trusting and nice guy. And after visiting England and having a meeting with Castro, Dennis decided to partner with him anyway. So in November 1977, D.E.B Music was incorporated in the UK with Dennis Brown and Castro Brown as co-directors. Dennis would take care of the music side of things, while Castro would handle all the day-to-day running of that business, as he already had experience running the now defunct Morpheus Records. But getting a record label up and running would require some serious resources. So to raise money, Dennis Brown performed for 5 consecutive nights at Castro's nightclub in London. Given Dennis's star power, the 5 shows were sold out and the place packed with screaming fans as the Prince of Reggae delivered sensational shows back to back. And that new label's birth coincided with Dennis Brown's conversion to Rastafari, and he would launch his new imprint with the LP Wolves and Leopards, a solid and classic roots compilation that was the first album released under D.E.B music. And that album was a critical and commercial success, both in England, Jamaica, and several other countries with good sales numbers. And for the first time, Dennis Brown was getting his money directly into his bank account. And it got even better when Castro arranged a deal for the label's releases to be issued through a company affiliated with Richard Branson's Virgin Records, implying even greater distribution and, of course, more sales. And Dennis, being the nice guy he was, decided to allow his friends get in on the action, and he signed his good friend Gregory Isaacs on a deal to release an album. And that arrangement would birth the 9-track Mr. Isaacs album that also came out in the same year. Dennis' second album on that label, titled Visions of Dennis Brown, went on to become a spectacular hit that went up to number 1 on the UK Reggae Albums chart and would stay in the charts for 5 months straight. By 1978, Dennis and Castro were practically swimming in money and began to expand the label's roster to release singles from artists like Augustus Pablo, Gregory Isaacs, as well as Michael Rose and Black Uhuru. And around that time, Dennis brought singer Junior Delgado to the UK in August 1978 and will sign him up as a bona fide D.E.B music artist. And the label would also sign up a young female British singer who had been a part of a trio called Brown Sugar. And that lady named Karen Wheeler would achieve big success as lead singer of UK soul R&B group Soul to Soul a decade later. In 1979, Dennis released his next album, Joseph's Coat of Many Colors, to great results, and it seemed like D.E.B music could do no wrong, and was set to join the ranks of the major independent record labels in England when cracks began to appear. Though then based in England, Dennis was spending plenty of time in Jamaica, where the music was being recorded, and left everything else to Castro Brown. The aforementioned distribution deal with Virgin Records specified that D.E.B Music's records were to be supplied and sold strictly from particular stores. But Castro, for reasons best known to him, was quietly supplying records to several record stores in London that weren't approved. And when Virgin Records' agent found out, it resulted in a major feud with Castro and the breach of the agreement saw the contract terminated with D.E.B Music. Dennis Brown was a huge star, but the intricacies of record distribution were simply no joke. He and Castro would try their best to push further releases on their own, but that largely failed and their sales figures would drop, leaving Dennis very disappointed. And to top that, the logistical cost of distribution also began to diminish their revenue, and that led to a fallout, at least in a business sense, between Dennis and Castro. And the label was wound up by mutual consent in late 1979. And Dennis, who had always craved independence from the greedy producers back home, was forced to fall back into their arms once again, though he continued living in England up until the late 1980s. And from then on, D.E.B Music and all its material would stay on ice until 2001, 2 years after Dennis Brown had passed away. Though the label had existed for just 2 years, it produced a large catalogue of music that was acquired by Sony Music Japan, and quite a number of lovers rock compilations with tracks from artists like Alton Ellis and Black Harmony, who would be released officially in 2004 to massive critical acclaim. In fact, Black Harmony's song Don't Let It Get to Your Head was included on the soundtrack of the best-selling video game GTA San Andreas. I can only imagine how big D.E.B music might have become if only it had been run professionally and by the book. But truth be told, musicians haven't been known to run record labels very well, with the Rolling Stones as prime example, with the way they handled Peter Tosh after signing him to their label in 1978. But in this particular case, the main factor is that Dennis Brown was just too much of a nice guy to really keep an enterprise as tricky as a record label on a straight path. But such, they say, is life. So there you have it. Thank you for watching the video today. Please leave a like, subscribe, and until next time, Jah bless.